Hey, out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 104th edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, brought to you by me, your host, Mac B, the Wolf. And I will be joined shortly by my co-host and partner in crime, Action Jackson, from the East Coast of the United States. Just trying to make my way in Europe here and doing my best as the weather is starting to change. It's a lot closer to winter here in North Holland than one would like to think at this time of year, but back home, as I'm recording this, people are getting ready for Thanksgiving, and we're going to do our best to enjoy a little bit of tradition and maybe a little football on Turkey Day, even though it's not really a big thing here in Amsterdam. And I hope you guys enjoyed last week's show on Blue Oyster Cult with Martin Popoff. Martin's an incredibly gifted writer and has written over 100 books. And if you go to martinpopoff.com, you can order some of those books as the holiday season is coming. It's going to be Black Friday when a lot of you listen to this. So you're looking for gifts for the rocker in your life, go to martinpopoff.com and pick some up. And hopefully we'll have a store for the Ugly American Werewolf fans out there where you can buy some t-shirts and some other goodies. We've been working on it for a while. We're trying to get it right. We're technologically challenged here at the Wolf. So we're doing our best, trying to improve our sound, trying to improve the quality of our show. And yes, trying to find more ways to interact with our listeners. And hopefully the shop will be up and running here soon, if not for Black Friday, then very shortly thereafter, and you'll be able to find some UAWIL, Ugly American Werewolf in London goodies for the rocker in your life. And we appreciate any support you can give us there. It was a fun show with Martin, kind of a general overlook of Blue Oyster Cult. And this week we wanted to kind of go back to doing our album review thing, just me and Jackson. And there's a couple albums that came out in 1982 that maybe weren't the most classic, but they were important in the catalog of certain artists. And the one we're going to look at this week is It's Hard by The Who, made after the death of Keith Moon, about 4 years later. It was kind of their swan song for a while there. I mean, 1982, they did a tour after It's Hard, and then they broke up. And they basically stayed broken up until they did a reunion tour and did Tommy in 1989, which was a huge deal. You're like, The Who are back. But between that, The Who were basically done. Pete Townshend was a solo artist. Roger Daltrey was a solo artist and a bit of an actor. John Entwhistle was living the life of a retired rock star for the most part. There really was no Who from about 83 or so until 89 when they came back. And It's Hard had a couple of hits on there. Athena, and of course, Eminence Front, which is the big one, which you see in car commercials and movies to this day, had an interesting video of them getting ready for their tour back in the day, which we'll talk about here. But it kind of showed a band that was in transition. Like, we know we're too old to be rock stars because there really weren't any 40-year-old rock stars at that point. There's no such thing. Like, well, we know we have to move on because there's no such thing as a 40-year-old rock star. But is there? And so there's a lot of lament and wondering about, do I have to give this up? What do I have to go on to? Why do I have to move on to something else? I've created a nice life for myself. Why does it have to end? So interesting times for The Who, interesting lyrics from Pete Townshend and from John Entwhistle. And in listening to the whole thing, I'm actually pretty impressed with this album. It's a lot better than I remember it. Some of it may still be dated or of a time, but some of it has aged pretty well. And I think you'll enjoy listening to our show and the record itself. That quick, we have a little bit of business to take care of. One, we are proud members of the Pantheon network of podcasts, really all music-related podcasts, about 100 different shows with some amazing hosts, some of whom we've had on our show or been on theirs, like Paul Stevenson of Vintage Rock Pod or This Day Rocks, like Christy Alexander Hallberg of Rock is Lit, like Jay Scott at The Hook Rocks, and like the Kiss Kings, Tom and Zeus of the #1 rated Kiss podcast, Shout It Out Loudcast. And we have to thank our wonderful sponsors, rarevinyl.com. Look, guys, rarevinyl.com has been doing this almost 40 years. They're based in the UK. They have the most extraordinary collection of LPs and singles, 12-inch and 7-inch singles. But they also have CDs. They also have DVDs, tour programs, things like that. So if you're looking for a hard-to-find item or maybe a first edition record, go to rarevinyl.com or EIL.com. Use the code PODCAST, PODCAST, and you can get 10% off not only your first order, but every order you make with them. The holidays are coming up. A lot of you are listening to this on Black Friday. Go to rarevinyl.com. Use the code PODCAST. Save yourself 10%. Get that special item for the rocker in your life. They ship all over the world. And the UK and the US, which are our two biggest markets, are their two biggest markets. So be sure to check out rarevinyl.com. Now back to the Who. Yeah, a lot of people thought the Who were done after Keith Moon died, and they decided to soldier on a bit because they're still making money. They still had some music to do. They still had some obligations they had to do. And so they picked up Kenney Jones of the Faces, a very good drummer in his own right, different than Keith Moon, more of a straight ahead rock drummer. And it allowed them to make Face Dances in 1981. And then the record we're reviewing here today, It's Hard, in 1982. Did some touring with them, the big farewell tour of North America in 1982, 83. And then that's it. The Who were done for a while. So listen to our take on it. Keith Moon is dead. Pete Townshend is becoming more of a solo artist. Roger Daltrey is exploring a world without the Who. MTV has come along. And aging rock stars don't look as good as the shiny new rock stars like the Duran Durans and the Michael Jacksons of the world. So the Who are very much a band wondering what their place in the world is, not only as musicians and as artists, but as people. You're not supposed to just fall over and die when you're 37 years old. Maybe you can't be on the cover of Tiger Beat magazine anymore, but you still got to have a career. You still got to do something every day, don't you? And I think that's what they were struggling with. And it's something that I think we all struggle with at some point in our lives. It's like, what is my purpose? Why am I supposed to be here? Am I just here to make money? Am I just here to make another generation of people and put them into the machine? I don't know. I think it's more poignant than ever, and that's why we reviewed it here today on The Ugly American Werewolf in London. It's the Who's It's Hard, right here on The Wolf. It's different when you talk about the Who, when you talk about Pete Townshend, because he's regarded as the real poet, the real person who could really outline what rock and roll was. The snobs who think, and to a degree, we're part of this, that, rock and roll is this true art form. And he's one of the ones who's really taking it to that next level with his rock operas, with being able to discern the plights of people around the world in just a couple of lines, along with some killer riffs. So I guess when you talk about Pete Townshend selling out, it's different than, say, some pop band who was obviously always there just to sell out and sell as many records as they could while they had the time of the spotlight.
So then I wonder why now, out of all these years, would you have done it? Is it just because you think it's okay? It's kind of passed by. I mean, like you said, it's 40 years old. So it's kind of lived its life. And if it can have a new life as something else and I get paid, okay, that'll work. Plus, I think too, like what you were talking about, maybe with Eminence Front was a little bit different of a message that he was conveying. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, that's right. And let's pull back a little bit here. Look, obviously the Who are one of the greatest rock bands of all time. When I was growing up, they were up kind of there with the Beatles and Stones, really. They were British. They were kind of in that second wave of British invasion. It's like after the Beatles and the Stones, before Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, all that stuff happened. In the middle, in the kind of mid to late 60s, like the Who and Pink Floyd were not quite on that early wave of Rolling Stones, Beatles. They weren't quite on that latter wave of Zeppelin and all that. They were kind of in the middle there, but still very highly regarded. When I was growing up, I kind of saw them as maybe the top 3, certainly top 5 band of all time.
I would agree with you, especially in that same sentence with the rest of those bands. You're right. They weren't there with the Beatles and the Stones, but they definitely came a close second. And I wonder if they always kind of, Townshend, and I think he was probably a little bit younger too. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I wonder if he always kind of had that chip on his shoulder. Like he thought they should be like in the same rarefied air with the Stones and the Beatles.
Yeah. And they, as far as America goes, they kind of surpassed the Kinks. And I think that their rock opera, Tommy and Quadrophenia, and then of course in the middle was Who's Next, which is one of the greatest rock albums ever, which we did review last year in the lead up to our 50th show. But so they're kind of in that rarefied air, and Pete Townshend, especially since he's the one who writes all the songs and all the lyrics for the most part. Entwhistle does get a song, maybe 2 on the albums. And on this one, he got a few, and we'll talk about that. But he's kind of regarded as, rock god, and how to articulate this in a way that transcends boundaries, that makes it more of an art form than just singing about chicks and cars and having big riffs, right?
Right. And it's strange too, because I always kind of thought that he was the kind of the tortured soul of this deal because he could write the songs, but he could sing. He's got a pretty good voice,
Right.
but he doesn't have a Roger Daltrey voice. So it was always kind of like, he always kind of felt bad about that. He always kind of felt like he was maybe deficient in that era, area.
Yeah, but nor does he have Roger Daltrey's looks or stage presence or bravado.
Right.
Everything that Robert Plant is, you can kind of go back and say, well, yeah, Roger Daltrey was doing it just a little bit before he was, wasn't he?
And so there's your thing. You've got two choices now. You could do it yourself and not be as successful, or have this other guy do it with you and be extremely successful. But you're standing there next to him like, oh, hey, everybody remember, I wrote this song. Okay, we got that, Pete. Thank you.
Yeah, we understand, pal. That's okay.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I mean, this is 1982 when It's Hard comes out. It's really the last Who album. Yes, they've had a couple more. They had Endless Wire after John Entwhistle had died in the 2000s. They actually had a great album called The Who come out right before COVID, and I loved it. I thought it was awesome. Okay. It was the best thing they had done, certainly since It's Hard, maybe since the 70s. And I was really excited to see them play it live. But of course, when I had tickets to see them do it live, that was right after COVID sprung its ugly head. So they postponed it a year. And then when they had to postpone again, they just said, no, they just canceled it. So hopefully they are going to tour again at some point and do these songs. I mean, I do think they're doing some dates. I don't know how much of it is around that album, but I felt a little cheated about that. But a lot of people say that It's Hard and the previous year's Face Dances don't even count as Who records because Keith Moon wasn't there anymore.
Okay. I mean, you can play that card and you can definitely hear that. I mean, Kenney is a fantastic drummer, Kenney Jones, but he's not Keith Moon. And you can, I don't know, you can say that, but I think that he definitely contributed, but the main songwriting being Townshend and Entwhistle. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can pick it apart any way you want. I don't think that's true. I think if you've got 3 of the 4, it's still a Who record.
I think so too. And Keith Moon, though, his drumming was special and kind of inimitable. Not a lot of people can just play like him. Kenney Jones is a fine drummer. He was in the Faces and kind of a straight ahead rock drummer, right? I mean, he's keeping them out and he's giving them the space so they can all call off and do their own thing, because goodness knows Entwhistle can still do all sorts of sick stuff with the bass there, right? Yeah. And this is his last album as a member of The Who as well.
And I think that when you look back on it now, it's interesting now to look at this with Face Dances and It's Hard, because I think they didn't really like either one of these when they came out. I know Daltrey, I was reading, said, well, we should have never released this record. And Townshend wasn't a super huge fan of Face Dances at the time. And it's got to be rough, too, because I think Face Dances went platinum. This did not go platinum.
Right.
So now you're thinking, maybe we are done. Maybe time has passed us by.
Well, the fact of the matter is they had not been very prolific in that last 10 years, right? I mean, they kind of did Tommy and Quadrophenia, and in the middle, he was trying to do the Lifehouse thing. It got boiled down into Who's Next. And those 3 really kind of set them up for the rest of the 70s and really kind of the rest of their careers, to be honest, because then, they started doing some greatest hits stuff. They did the Who by Numbers in 75, which was not huge. They did Who Are You? It was big because it had the song Who Are You? And then, Keith Moon died not too long after its release. So then it kind of became, this is the swan song for Keith Moon. But, they did the Tommy movie. What was that, in 75 or something like that, with Anne Margaret, who I love you still to this day, Anne Margaret. And it had a cool soundtrack. It had Elton John in it and Eric Clapton in it and, all these different folks in it. So then they had to work on the soundtrack for that. They eventually made The Kids Are All Right movie, which was kind of a documentary, but it's a killer soundtrack and a cool movie as well. Plus then eventually they made the Quadrophenia movie, and then they had to do the soundtrack to that movie. So they were kind of, I won't say they were necessarily resting on their laurels, but they were trading on their past instead of being a new band making new music, right?
Right. And then in 1980, you get Empty Glass.
Right. Right. Because Daltrey had done some solo records in the 70s. Maybe he wants to sing some other stuff, people's stuff. Keats busy trying to do these rock operas and these movie scores and all that kind of stuff. So then Empty Glass, the Pete Townshend solo record comes out with the huge sensation, Let My Love Open the Door.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in a bad mood and that song comes on and then you're not in a good mood afterwards, there's something wrong with you. You may not be human. That is an amazing rock song. And how many movies and TV shows has that been in over the years?
Yeah, there too many to count, but I know that every once in a while you'll hear it in a movie, and like you said, it's a great tune, but I don't think it did as well as he wanted it to, sales wise. And so then,
he doesn't have that Who banner to help, right?
Right. So are you thinking like, you know what, maybe I don't need these guys anymore. I'm going to go do my own thing. I write the songs anyway. So, and then it kind of, I don't think it did horribly, but it didn't do as well as he wanted it to. So then it's like, well, maybe we go and do the Who again. And, you come up with Face Dances, that does all right. And now apparently on this record, the record company had a gun to their head saying, we need another one right now. And so now you're in kind of a weird spot. You have to make a record, really want to make a record. Is everybody happy with each other? Who knows? And
right. You've lost Keith Moon. So is it even the Who anymore? It's different now. You have to wrap up all the legal stuff around the loss of Keith Moon. You have to go audition and get a drummer if you're going to go out and play shows, which they did. They didn't do huge tours in like 79 or 80, but they did some shows and stuff like that. Into 81, you go ahead. We'll make another. We'll make the Face Dances record. We'll use the Eagles' Bill Simsick as our producer because, he had all this huge success in the 70s. So we'll utilize him. You get You Better You Bet out of it, which honest to God, it's my favorite Who song of all time. It's catchy. It's upbeat. It's not classic. It's not off Who's Next or Tommy or anything like that, but I absolutely love the song.
Which I wonder too. I understand you didn't like it when it came out, but you've got to, after a while, you've got to appreciate it if you're Townsend. Come on, people like that record. People love that song.
That song's great, man.
Yeah, give it a break.
And they still do it live because it's awesome. It's a great song. So, all right, so that's 81. So then the record company wants another one. All right, well, we're not going to use Bill Simsick this time. We're going to go back to the well with our buddy, Glyn Johns, who was the man responsible really for taking all of Pete's craziness that was trying to become Lifehouse and get it into Who's Next, which is honestly, it's one of the best rock records of all time.
Right. And he worked with, we talked about Get Back. He was a big part of the Beatles army of people that they worked with. And it was interesting too, because I was looking at this and I was, Glyn Johns, take a look at him. And something about working with the Beatles, and he's like, they were, it basically was just another job. I went in there, they were a professional, did their thing, and then we left. I'm like, wow, you're kind of a stone cold pro of a guy. If you could just walk in there and be involved with that Let It Be stuff and just walk out, it's like, another day at the office. What are you going to do?
Right.
But definitely an accomplished person who that makes sense when you want to get back on track. If you get people around you who have that pedigree, we talk about like guys like Mutt Lange and Bob Rock, something like that. You want a heavy hitter in there to make sure that the ship is headed in the right direction.
No doubt about it. And Pete, so he's given all this praise in the press. He's given praise by his peers. He's like, okay, well, I can do this on my own. Look, Let My Love Open the Door. It went to number 1 on American AOR radio. Maybe not, Billboard all the way up there like that, but still got into the top 10. Billboard, I think went to number 5, at least the album did. And it's triple platinum after all these years. So, he wasn't quite done yet.
Right.
But it's like, okay, well, let's go back to the Who. Let's go back to the mothership. You do Face Dances. And then it comes time to do It's Hard. And I think at this point, everyone knew that the Who were about done. I think between the loss of Keith Moon, the fact that Pete had the ability to do other things with other people. Roger had been more of an actor. Even though in Tommy, he was just kind of pretended to be blind, deaf, and dumb. He's acting in that. He was acting in McVicker. He was doing some other stuff. So Roger had other things that he could do. And was Pete even saving his best stuff for the Who? After Rough Boys and Little Is Enough, and obviously the big one was Let My Love Open the Door. It's like, is he even bringing us his best stuff anymore? Because that's kind of what the Who is. Pete writes the music, comes up with the ideas for the songs, he sells it to them, And then they all kind of come in and put in their stuff. Maybe Entwistle throws in a song here or there, right? So, I mean, are they even getting the best out of Pete anymore?
So that's an interesting thing to think about too. So if you're Daltrey and Entwistle sitting there and you're going through these ideas, yeah, is that in the back of your head? Like, what else have you got? What else are you not telling me that maybe you've got, in the back seat of the car that I'll save that for something else.
Right. Right. And the Who at this point are much of a legacy act. I mean, they're putting out soundtracks to stuff that is older. They're putting out greatest hits albums, like Hooligans. The year after this is when that classic Who's Greatest Hits with the guy with the Union Jack button-down shirt on the cover that everybody in the suburbs had growing up,
Right.
That would come out afterwards. So the Who kind of know that they're on their last legs. And the thing is, there were no such things as rock stars in their 40s. I mean, they just didn't exist. Elvis had died, 5 years earlier or whatever. The Beatles were long since broken up. John Lennon was dead. The Stones were kind of like them. They're like, yeah, we're about to turn 40, but it also might be about the end. It was that 81, 82 period where the Who did a big tour of the North America, as did the Stones. And everyone's like, okay, this is it. Because there's no such thing as 40-year-old rock stars.
Right. Nobody who was, listening to MTV or watching MTV at this time wanted to see, these guys, like you said, they're old. We want new stuff. We want it to sound new. We want it to look new. We want new people, new faces to look at on the TV. And so, if you're Daltrey and Townshend, I mean, you're rich, right? I mean, like it's not about the money at this point in time, but it's like, do I just need to go away? Do I just need to retire because I'm irrelevant at this point?
Or do I need to go do something else? And here's the thing. It's not like they look bad. They're in their late 30s. They're still in good shape. You can see in the videos, they're still looking pretty darn good. Entwistle looks good. Kenney Jones is in great shape. He's just a little bit younger than him. Maybe he's 35 or 34 or something like that, So it's not like they couldn't have done it. And the tour was big. But I also think that the tour that happened in America in the late 70s, early 80s, where the people were crushed at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They had those deaths. I think that was starting to take a toll on them. Just like, what's happening here? This isn't peace, love, and understanding. This is the real nastiness that Pete's been warning about us for years. And so I think he was ready to kind of step back like, okay, I don't need to do this anymore. And, for the most part, after this, they were done. They quit. There was no more new Who. There were no more tours. They might show up for a Live Aid or something like that. But until they came back in 89 to really do Tommy with a star-studded cast and do a killer tour that was really big. I remember it was all over MTV. It was a big deal for me. But they were ready to walk away after It's Hard.
Right. And if you want to touch on that Giant Stadium tour that they did, or Giant Stadium show, it was massive, would be an understatement in the New York area. I mean, they hyped that thing for I want to say 2 or 3 months. They were talking about it. I mean, it was July 2nd and 3rd, 89 at Giant Stadium. They simulcast it on every radio station out of New York. Yeah. It was just, they were back at that point in time in 2 nights. Everybody all of a sudden was like, oh yeah, the Who. We love the Who. We love Tommy. These guys are great. So they did have that, but you're right. This is like that in between, we're done. I don't think that they even thought to do this at that point in time. Yeah. And you're like, well, yeah, time to move on now. Time to, retire and then do other things. It's got to be difficult. It's got to be difficult because you'd spent so long on top. And now it's, again, like I said, it's not that anybody's going to cry for you. You've got the money, you've got the fame, you can do whatever you want now, but it's the relevance now that you've lost.
Well, yeah. And nobody really expected to be doing this into their 40s.
Right.
When they started as teenagers in the 60s. Keith Moon's 15 when he joins the Who, or something crazy like that. The Beatles are in their teenagers, in the early 60s when they first get together. They're not thinking, well, I'll do this for 10 years and then I'll do something. No, I'll do this for 18 months until my mom grabs me by the ear and says, all right, come on, you're coming back home and getting a job or whatever, They didn't know it was going to become what it was. And the Who were one of those people who really elevated rock and roll to more of an art form, and they found different ways to cash in on it. But here they are in the early 80s. MTV is out. It's the new wave thing. And are we looking for aging rock stars? Well, most people weren't. So in a way, It's Hard is really the Who's swan song. I know Endless Wire comes out about a quarter of a century later. And then, 15 or so years after that, they make the Who album, which again, I really like. I know a lot of people didn't hear it. I would encourage you to check it out because I think it's awesome. But it's past their prime. There's no Entwistle. There's no Keith Moon. And so this is the end. This is them taking everything they've learned and everything that's going around at the time to come in with what is in my mind is really their swan song. It's hard. And they kind of knew it too, because the cover is them at an arcade, like someone's playing like an Atari game, which is kind of the updated version of Pinball Wizard. Like, where's the modern Pinball Wizard with those kind of like those early 80s computerized graphics, which I think was supposed to make it like new, but right now, I mean, it completely dates. It's like, oh, I know exactly when you release this album, right?
Correct. Yeah, with you're talking about like the lettering for the exactly. Yes. And it's interesting too, because if you look at the album cover, it's the four of them and the kid with his back turned playing the video game, and they just look out of place. They look uncomfortable, kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't belong here. I don't video arcade. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, versus Face Dances, where each member had like 4 different versions of a drawing or a portrait of them. So that's something kind of artistic there. This is really just like, yep, here we are. Look at us, aging rock stars. Still look pretty good, don't we?
Yeah.
Don't we? Do you like us? Yeah.
Although it's interesting that Kenny's on the cover.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that they had the notion, even if he was just paid, right? You still had to present that this is a band. It's like Ronnie Wood famously didn't become a member, like a quote unquote fully paid, full share member of the Stones until Voodoo Lounge, which means he did it for about 20 years. But he was on the cover of every album, just like everybody else, for those 20 years, right? So it was a business thing, maybe, that Kenney wasn't necessarily a member of the Who, but you got to have a drummer and you got to say, hey, we're a 4-piece and here's the 4 of us.
Yeah, it's interesting now because that just doesn't happen. Even if if it's the Who now, it's just the 2 of them. They will not put anybody else. Everybody else is just a paid musician. So, I think back then they really did think of this like, I don't know if they knew how much longer they were going to go, but they figured that for the rest of the time, Kenney would just be the drummer.
That's right. And an accomplished drummer, a fine musician in his own right. No doubt about it.
But it's interesting. I saw I don't know what it was. It was a video, I guess, for Eminence Front. But it was kind of a promo one, so it was a little bit longer. And they showed them all showing up to the video shoot, and they were all by themselves. Limo pulls up, Roger gets out. Another limo pulls up, Pete gets out.
Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that because I remember it from back in the day, and I've rewatched it several times here.
Hi, this is Jeff Downs. You're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf.
Well, let's get into it. Let's get into the album because it's 12 songs long, which is a little bit more than usual. Although the record's not that long; it's about 46 minutes. So some of these songs are pretty short.
Yeah, I thought the same thing too. I was like, well, this is going to be a long haul. Wait a minute, 40 minutes. Okay, so these are just 2 and change. Then some of these,
a lot of these are, yeah. And to me, there's a big difference between side 1 and side 2.
Okay.
In that, you're really trying to do something with side 1. Side 2, there's a lot of phoning it in, if you ask me, or the songs just don't equal what they should for a Who album. And look, like I said, they only made from 73 to 81. They really only made a couple of records in there.
Right.
Between Quadrophenia and was it Face Dances? Of course, Face Dances Part 2 ended up on All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes on Pete's Next. So, which I think came out the same year as this. I think it came out in 1982.
Yeah.
The same year as this. So, so Pete, wasn't just, he had his own big solo album. Then they did Face Dances. Then he did his next solo album and the next Who album in 82. So maybe he was starting to burn out.
Yeah. And you were talking about the second side of the album, which we'll get into, but it could be a thing too, where you want a record, you show up with tracks and they say, well, that's great, but this isn't a whole album. Okay, hold on. We got a couple more in the back here. We'll just grab those and throw them on.
Yeah. It's like, oh, let's just get it all out there, right? This is the Who. There's not a whole lot left of it, so let's get it out there. Released in September of 1982, and the first single was the first song on the album, Athena. And we've heard this on the radio over the years. She's just a girl. She's a ball. Just a girl. She's a ball. Did you know the story behind this before doing research for it?
Not before the research, no.
Me neither.
No.
I had no idea. Yeah.
Athena was not the working title of the song.
It was
Teresa,
named after
the lovely and talented Teresa Russell.
Yeah, and so she's an actress. She was a model turned actress. What a surprise. And I guess he had met her in early 1980 when he had gone to see Pink Floyd perform The Wall. Okay. And she was either dating or engaged to director Nick Rogue, who I guess is British. But Pete had his first line of cocaine that night, apparently. And then he got wasted, which was something he had a habit of doing. And he decided he was in love with this girl, Teresa, who was not in love with him. It's like, I think being an actress, I'd rather date a director than date an aging rock star. So so he made the song about her. And then Roger's like, you can't call Teresa, man. You're going to get in too much trouble, So never knew that. And it was actually, he came up with that during the Face Dances sessions. And the song just couldn't get ready. And I guess Roger's like, you cannot release it as Teresa. That's not happening. So it didn't get on there. But he reworked enough, changed it to Athena, and first single off the album. So
now, and I was thinking about this because I did not know any of the story until doing research for this record. But now here's the interesting part to me. So if you're Townshend, you have this, it's not even really an affair because nothing happened.
Infatuation.
Yeah. Right. You were pining for her. She kind of, she rejected you. It was probably not the easiest thing to go through. You write this song, but to Daltrey, it's just a song, whatever, who cares? Let's go. Right. Can put it up there. So it's that interesting. You wrote the song, but you don't sing it. So you couldn't put the same kind of emotion into it, or Daltrey can't put the same kind of emotion into it because it's just a job for him.
It's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of what you're starting to see. I think it's why the Who are starting to split apart, right? Because he needs Roger to sing these things. And sometimes he's amazing at it. And sometimes he doesn't get it the way he hoped he would.
Right.
So then Pete gets to sing. Okay. Well, if Pete's singing lead, what does Roger do while Pete's singing?
What are you talking about?
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. I mean, he totally is. Okay. Yeah. Uncomfortable. But this is a good track because you've got Daltrey's voice. He's the voice of the Who. We know that. Right. But then Townshend comes in with the, just a girl. That's a great drop in, not even a drop in, but on top to come in. Like the two of them working together are very good.
Absolutely. Free ride for me. I'm looking at you. Like that was the song that Pete's like, ooh, that's a really good song. And it's got both of our voices in it. So that kind of started the whole, we can harmonize a little bit together. But then of course, since Pete had this big success with Empty Glass, he thought he should sing some songs lead. And so then that ends up with issues also. But they actually played this 10 times on the 1982 tour.
Okay.
And you hear some horns in there. When there's horns on a Who album, that's Entwistle, man. That's the ox bringing what he brings, And
there was something too I wrote down about how it sounds like he's doing something weird with the bass, like he's popping the strings or something underneath. He's not. I think he does the thing where it's almost like flamenco playing, where he's, instead of plucking it forward, he's like strumming it, instead of pulling it backwards, he's strumming it forward. It's a really cool effect that he's doing down there, just kind of grooving with this song.
And very hard to imitate. You don't see people who play like John Entwistle. I'll tell you, one of my bigger disappointments on the album is I don't hear him as clearly in the mix as I would like on a lot of this stuff.
Okay. Yeah. I would agree with you on that. You really like to hear that. It was probably like 4 or 5 times through the song. And all of a sudden, like, hey, there's something, wait a minute, there's something going on in the corner there. Let me go check that out. It's not real pronounced.
And that's what he's famous for. That's the texture he brings to the Who. And that's what I want to hear. And I think on this album, I don't know if that's Glyn Johns or that he's just going through the motions, but it's a little disappointing that you don't hear Ox the way you would like to.
Absolutely.
Hold on. Okay. It was backed. So it was released in the UK and the US. A Man is a Man was the B-side in the UK. It's Your Turn was the B-side in the US. And we're going to get to those because those are on side 2 of this album. Okay. But number 2, It's Your Turn. This is one of the 3 John Entwistle pinned songs. And you can hear there's a little bit of, this is very rare on a Who record. There's a second guitar player on there, and it's not Pete. It's Andy Fairweather Lowe. And
even though it's Daltrey sings this, but you can tell it's an Entwistle song because the bass is right there at the beginning. They've got a little bit of the synth part, which makes it sound a little bit dated. But yeah, you can tell the bass is just ringing at the beginning. Okay, this is a John Entwistle song.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, totally true, Jackson. Yeah, and it's like you don't have to think about it too much. Like,
it's nice too that they put it on track 2 because it's not like all of his stuff is. I think this is the only one that he has on the first side. No, I'm sorry, he has Dangerous also. But It's nice that they put that on there because it kind of changes it gives you a change up right off the bat.
True, and the thing is, I mean, this sounds like someone who's talking. I don't know if he's talking to the young rockers who are coming up, or if he's talking to himself, like, hey, you used to be that young rocker. Now you're like a middle-aged man still looking to find that, trying to understand his place in the world of young rockers. I mean, honestly, this is every bit lyrically as powerful as really anything Pete does on the record, if you ask me, as far as its poignancy and, what it meant to them at that time.
Yeah. And I wonder too, how did we were talking before about Townshend doing other things, Daltrey doing other things. Yeah. Does Entwistle now think, well, I mean, if there's no more Who, now what do I do? Do I just retire to my country estate? Do I play with another? I don't really have other projects that are burning a hole in my pocket at this point in time. Where is my place in all of this?
Well, he may not have had projects burning a hole in his pocket, but he had a lifestyle that was burning through money. And
and in
the 80s, I mean, he was ended up selling some basses and stuff like that to kind of keep the lights on because he never really became a solo artist. He never really sold a bunch of songs to other people. So the most of the Who's catalog is all written by Pete. So he's not getting any huge royalties. So like he needed that like 89 tour. He needed that so he could continue to maintain his lifestyle. And it's the lifestyle that ended up killing him because I'm fairly certain what killed him was doing cocaine on tour with the Who in the early 2000s.
Yeah. You got to leave that stuff behind.
At some point, Are you 60? Yes. Stop doing cocaine. Are you 50? Yes. Stop doing cocaine. Okay. Goodness gracious. I mean, I know you're a rock star and all. Watch the girls do it, and just have a brandy or something. Just come on.
Yeah. Maybe in a minute, ladies. Yeah. I'm fine over here.
But I like this. I mean, as far as, you're going to be like, okay, Pete's got the best songs, and then Entwistle's going to take you on, some interesting turns. But this one, to me, it fits in very well, and I like it, actually. And I'm surprised they put it number 2 on the record, but it's good.
Yeah, I'm glad that they did because it's. I think if you would have put this on the second side, it would have gotten lost.
I agree. And he's already got stuff down there, right? So, so no, this is good. But that molds into Cooks County. Now, what do you think about this one?
Well, okay. Is this one of those ones where you've made a decent living for yourself, right?
Right.
And you think like, again, how do I? Wait a minute. I'm driving past homeless people in my Bentley to my country estate. Like, are you starting to feel like, well, maybe we need to talk about this. Maybe we need to be more. I mean, before the Bonos of the world took over. This was kind of a, like, if you listen to the lyrics, you're like, oh, people are suffering. People are hungry. Yeah. I mean, you're trying to make a statement on this one.
Yeah. And that's kind of Pete's thing. It was usually more personal about what he had gone through or growing up in England after the war or something like that. But yeah, this is, and I guess it was based on, he saw a documentary on Cook County Hospital in Chicago about how the standards were not that great there, and the patient to doctor ratio was very poor, and they didn't have great facilities and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a very up-tempo song, but then you listen to it, it's about suffering and being lonely and how people die in the hospitals without the help they need, right?
And again, like I said, are you trying to raise awareness of that because you live this lifestyle that is you now understand how much better you have it than a lot of other people.
Maybe so. And the lyrics are decent; they're fine. But
Mhm.
to me, the music is not great on this one. It's very keyboard heavy, and I know
Yeah.
they had Tim Gorman in the studio, and I think on the tour to play a lot of that keyboard stuff and some of the stuff that Pete had programmed in on his synthesizers and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't really like the song that much. Maybe it's because it's a downer subject, but I think it's because the music just isn't that great. Maybe you get high marks for trying to do the right thing and shine some light on something that's that people need to know about, that we need to fix. But I mean, musically, I don't think the song's that good.
And if there's one knock against this record, and this track highlights that, there's a lot of that like real dated 80s keyboard sounds. If I didn't tell you anything about this and I just put this track on, I'd be like, what is this, 1982? Yeah, it's exactly 1982.
Exactly when it came out.
Exactly where it came from.
Yeah. But they did actually play this once when they played Chicago on that big 1982 farewell tour. They subbed something out and they played this one.
Hey, Chicago, you stink. Here's a song about your awful hospital.
Yeah. Thanks for buying a ticket.
Right.
So then we move along to the title track, number 4 on the first side, It's Hard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this has a lot of value to me. I mean, it was the 3rd single off the album. It came out in February of 1983, backed with Dangerous, which was also an Entwistle pen track, which, that's got to help Ox some, right? Okay, maybe you don't get that much royalties from the records, but if they put out a single that does okay and yours is the B-side, you get paid for that, buddy. You know? So that's got to help out, right?
Yeah.
And it's basically about coupling things together, talk about how life is hard, and I can do some of the couplings for you if you like here.
Go for it.
It's hard. It's very, 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 very hard. It's so fucking hard. Any tough can fight, few can play. Any fool can fall, few can lay. Any man can claim, few can find. Any brain can hide, few can stand. It's basically talking about how difficult life is to always do the right thing. Like anyone can say, amazing things, but very few can mean them. That kind of stuff. Like it's hard to be it's easy to make a kid, but it's hard to be a father. That kind of stuff.
Right.
Everyone complains, few can state. Anyone can stop, few can wait. But really, eventually, it kind of sounds like Pete's whining. And now our great author, our great song master, who has taught us all these things over the years, it's kind of like, what are you whining about? Are you whining about getting old? Are you whining about how hard it is to write songs for you and the Who and balance all that kind of stuff? Because we really don't want to hear that stuff, to be honest.
It is hard to hear somebody who is rich and famous complain about, well, you don't know the hard times I've seen. Really? Come on.
Right.
But it's interesting too, because this one started off life, I think, during Face Dances as Popular, I think. Correct. Was the name of it.
Yeah.
So basically Pete Townshend's like your grandmother. He's not gonna throw anything away. Never throw it away. But you didn't like it then? Hold on a minute. Let me put a little salt on here, mix it around. Right. Do you like it now? We'll put
Instead
it out.
of Popular, I'll change it to It's Hard.
Correct.
And I'll rework the melody a little bit. Okay, you like it now? Great, let's do that. Well, it's not like anyone else is really coming up with that much. It's amazing to me that Roger Daltrey, who's such a fine singer, isn't much of a songwriter. Not even the lyrics. I understand you can't make music fine, but don't you have something you want to say?
But that's tough, because maybe you feel like, so you've got 2 guys in the band that can write songs. Obviously one is more prolific than the other, but maybe you want to write songs, you just don't have the goods. Like, you would bring it to them like, are you serious? It's just, do you really want to do this, or are you joking around? Like, forget it. I'm not doing anything now. I don't know. I mean, it must be intimidating to be in the presence of somebody who seems like, he can just get up in the morning and be like, okay, who are you? Okay, just write that. Here's what I came with today, boys. So I don't know, but it is a little strange looking through the rest of the hard rock catalog that the singer does not write any of the songs. That's very strange.
It's strange, and then because Pete is gonna, sing a little bit about, on this, and they played it on that tour, Roger whipped out his Eminence Front guitar, where he's playing a little bit of guitar in there. It's very odd to see that,
Mhm.
I have seen that. We'll talk about that here in a minute.
Right?
But it was derided because if you listen to it and you listen to the way it goes, ding, 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 it's definitely got some of Bruce's Badlands in it.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's like, gee, Pete, Rolling Stone used to tell you were the greatest. Now they're telling Bruce he's the greatest. So now you're listening to him to get your riffs and listen to it a few times. And you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely Badlands. Yeah, absolutely.
And
but this was the last great single. This is the last great Who single until they came out with Endless Wire.
Right, right, because it was put out afterward. That's correct.
Yeah,
and I have it's kind of an upbeat song for everything basically sucking in the in the lyrics.
Yeah, because life is hard, right?
Yeah,
very, very hard. And they only played it on the It's Hard tour. I guess they didn't think it was worthy of breaking out after that. Of course, when you're a nostalgia act, you generally don't play your last single. You play all your 60s and 70s singles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still, they must have thought something of it because they named it. I mean, it's the name of the record.
Right. And I wonder too if it's, I don't know, are you, not to go too deep into this, but are you trying to say like, everything is hard, even doing this record is hard, you don't getting back together. But it's interesting too, like when you do a solo record, right? Mm-hmm. You're in charge. Everybody else is a hired hand.
They follow you.
Correct. But you also don't have anybody saying, well, let's not do that. Like you say, here are the 10 songs we're playing. Aye, Captain. Just let me know when you need me to be in the studio.
Exactly.
But and so it's interesting that even though he writes these songs, the band still has the veto power to say, we're not doing that, or I don't like that.
Roger and Ox can push back on him. Whereas when he, hires those guys, no matter how good they are, like, can I make it better for you, Pete? Can I add something else for you, Pete? Tell me when you want more, Pete.
Yeah.
So I don't know. To me, it's, if you take out the whininess and you take away the thinking, oh, it's hard to be a solo artist and in this band, it's hard to be married and out chasing tail all the time. It's hard to like girls and boys. That's what Rough Boys was about, So, okay, Pete, quit your whining. You're in your 30s. You should have plenty of money. People have it worse. Moving on. Yes. To track number 5, Dangerous by John Entwhistle, which was the B-side of It's Hard. It's obviously another Entwhistle composition and heavy on the bass, as you might expect.
Correct.
This is where I heard the bass the best, I feel like, maybe on the album. Certainly at the beginning, because there's just a lot of keyboards and chug guitar to complement his bass. Pete isn't doing much on this. He's kind of drowned out a little bit. You don't hear Pete guitar really on this thing.
No, you don't. And I don't know it was a keyboard at the beginning, but it almost sounds like some kind of like squeeze box they were trying to go for. Yeah, but again, the bass is out in front. This is an Entwhistle song. And then what is he saying? Fear is the key to your soul.
Fear is the key, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it shows some of the darker parts of society. I still think it's a lot more positive than a lot of Pete's stuff. Even if it does sound a little bit dated today, some of that keyboard stuff, again, you'd say, I know exactly when they recorded this. This is like 81 to 83 kind of areas. Like, yep, that's exactly right. So some of the lyrics are pretty good. Again, I give Entwhistle credit. It would be hard to go toe to toe with Pete Townshend on lyrics. It's kind of why George Harrison, didn't get a lot of stuff on records until he was older, because trying to compete with Paul and John when they're 2 or 3 years older than you is like, that's tough,
I've got something, but it's not the quality that needs to go on the record.
It's not yesterday.
Right. Well, it's got to be intimidating too when you write the song by yourself, if you're Entwhistle, and then you kind of bring it in and it's like, ooh, how's this going to go? I don't know. And maybe at this time he doesn't care, but especially at the beginning, it had to be intimidating for him.
Probably so. But then, I mean, you see Ox in interviews. He's a pretty chill, and he seems like a confident guy. Not to mention, I mean, I think he was every bit the musician, if not more, than Pete Townshend.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the stuff he does in the bass is so incredible. And Pete even admits it. He's like, okay, we're jamming along one night. He's like, I'm going to get him this time. I'm going to do something crazy. And because did all this crazy stuff. And then without missing a beat, here comes Ox. He's like, wouldn't have done it the other way. If he'd started that and I tried to repeat, that's not going to happen. And Ox does play all those horns and stuff like that. He does sing on a couple of odd Who tracks over the years. So Entwhistle was a loss to the community, and he couldn't have been a big lead singer. He wasn't going to front a band like that. But you would think he would have had more compositions. I don't know. He's in an interesting spot in rock and roll history. A legend, an inimitable legend, but one who's also kind of stuck in a box.
Yeah. And well, now we're in a different era too without Keith Moon, and we talked about this on Who's Next, but Jay Moore describes the Who as, it's lead guitar, lead vocals, lead bass, and lead drums. I mean, that was Entwhistle's thing, is I don't play the bass for somebody. Like, I do my own thing. I create my own space in the band. And he definitely, you're right. It's interesting that he never went on to do anything else, or work with anyone else, or have another band or anything like that, because he could do a lot, or he was doing a lot on these records.
Absolutely. And so, being that this is his last with the band, I'm glad that he got 3 songs on there. It's just disappointing that his bass is not out front as much as I would like, but that's just me.
Hi, this is Carl Palmer, and you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf.
Coming to song 6, and the last song on side 1 of the album or tape is Eminence Front.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the last great original Who song, really, honestly. It was the second single release on Christmas Day, 1982. So its 40th anniversary is coming up as we're recording this here, Jackson.
Interesting.
But it was a big hit on US radio. It really is what helped propel the album, to gold status and to get into top 20 and top 10 lists and things like that. The song did well. I mean, I remember it vividly, and they used to show it on MTV sometimes because, it's an odd song. First of all, it's pretty long. It's over 5 minutes. Secondly, there's all this like guitar noodling and a lot of programmed keyboard to start it off. The vocals don't come in until about 2 minutes into the song. That's very rare, especially in the early 80s.
And that's one of those things I never thought of until I started doing research for this record. Also, like there's a guitar solo at the beginning. Okay.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. You were right. He's just kind of noodling along over the keyboards, and then the rest of it comes in, and then the vocals. So it's not the way it's put together is very odd. And it's odd that it was that big of a hit. Because, you want, it comes in, you get riff, you get a little bit of the lyrics, you get the chorus, you get the solo, and then that's it. This is not put together that way.
No. So you got the kind of programmed keyboard in, which they're famous for on stuff like Baba O'Reilly and stuff like that. And then the riff, I mean, that's not real complicated. It's 3 notes in there. It's not a whole lot to it. And yet it's incredibly catchy,
Mm-hmm.
So, but then, yes, of course, because Keith is singing about this, and it's kind of a song about, I think it's a song about greed and cocaine and fame and stuff like that, right? And
correct.
Talk about, shares crash, hopes are dashed, people forget it, sunshine.
Yeah.
He's talking about stockbrokers and celebrities and rich jerks and all that kind of thing. But if Pete is singing, what's Roger going to do? Well, they hand him the Eminence Front Telecaster. Now in the video, it's black, but I took my buddy Tom, who we had on to talk about REM's document last year.
Oh yeah.
I had tickets to see the Who. They'd had to postpone because I think Roger was sick, so they came back later in the year. I'm like, I'm gonna take Tom, and we had pretty good seats. We're on the floor within the first 15 or 20 rows, something like that. And they brought out this kind of like not even blonde. It was like a cream colored Telecaster kind of thing. And I said, you see that? That's the Eminence Front guitar. Roger Daltrey's going to play that during Eminence Front because it was just like the black one he played in the video. And sure enough, when they played Eminence Front, that's exactly what he had on. And Tom's like, how did you know that? I'm like, look, I just know Roger doesn't need a guitar most of the time. He's not a guitar player per se, but he's not going to just sit there swinging the microphone around while Pete's singing Eminence Front, right? And he's not going to walk off the stage either because he's center stage. So they give him something he can play while Pete's doing his thing. So yeah, that's where it kind of comes from. If they hadn't made this album, I don't think you'd have ever seen Roger on the stage with the guitar.
And that's a very, looking at the video, it's a very uncomfortable deal because now so Pete is, what is he, stage left? right?
From their
Correct.
point of view, yeah. To us,
Yeah.
he's right, but yeah, for
Right.
them, he's stage left. Yeah.
But so then the camera's focusing on stage left, and you've got, you've got Daltrey doing. I don't mean, is he even really playing? I don't know what he's
Yeah,
doing
is
over
it
there.
plugged in?
Yeah, or is it? Yeah, it's plugged in, but you just turn it.
Yeah, right.
And so he's doing something there, but it's got to be weird for him because he is front and center the entire time. And Entwhistle's doing his thing, Kenney Jones is doing his thing. What do I do now? I kind of just dance around, like, getting ready to sing the chorus.
Yeah, and you could see the video. They're a band that aren't necessarily a band anymore. I mean, they start off the video. There's Kenney Jones, and he's there with like the crew and some of the
Right.
managers and stuff. Like, he's getting his drums all put together. Then Roger Daltrey pulls up in the limo, and he hops out, and he's got his hair all like frosted blonde and stuff like that. And he's hopping around. Hey guys, I'm here. Good to see you. Then comes a van, like a van with some windows in it, and that's what Pete gets out of. Now, you should note, you go back and watch. Ox is coming out of that van too. Okay. But as soon as Pete comes out, the camera is trained on Pete, and then Ox is kind of off to the left, in and out of the shot a little bit. It's like
with sunglasses on.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, yes, Ox is part, but you can see the star is here, right? Pete is here. You can see him talking to Kirbishley or maybe the manager or somebody like that, walking up there. Then he gets up and he's singing his part. And Roger's smiling, hopping around with his, little fender on, like, dude, you're not playing anything. Come on.
Right.
It's, this is a joke. Right?
And I was trying to listen for that. I'm like, yeah, where is that second guitar part? I don't really hear it.
No.
Maybe it's different live.
No.
Okay.
No, it's not,
Okay.
And I think that was at Maryland, maybe in Largo, Maryland, where they're getting ready for the tour or whatever, but it's like, yeah, not great. But I mean, look, it was a big hit for them. It got up on the radio in America. It's been in movies. It was on a killer episode of Miami Vice.
Correct.
And
which will always trump I understand now it's in a car commercial, but if you were included in the Miami Vice legend or
yes.
In the soundtrack, it will always be cool. Let's see, episode 3, season 3, Kill Shot, which premiered October 10th, 1986. Which is interesting that they waited that long to put it in the show, because I think it's premiered in 84. But
right, it's the third season.
Yeah, they wanted to make sure that it fit in, and it's actually kind of a cool scene. It's at night. They're on they're on the speedboat, trying to make it, hey, you're late, huh? I don't. 2 key deal doesn't make me on time.
Right, nice, dude. That's awesome. Yeah, and even the single, the sleeve on the single was like a 1930s Miami Art Deco house or hotel on there. So that's kind of another tie into that kind of Miami cocaine lifestyle that I think Pete was singing about here a little bit. But they still played it. I mean, when I saw them at Wembley, and it took my daughter in 2019, they played Eminence Front, and I got to tell you, it was awesome. It sounded killer.
You figure too, it was a big hit, and it is a chance for Daltrey for Townshend to shine. This is it. This is my moment. This is when I get to be the front man. We are playing this song.
And 70-year-old singers need a little bit of a break now and then.
Well, that's true too.
So Roger he doesn't have to sing that much except just come up, Eminence Front.
Yeah.
Eminence Front. That's all I have to do. But, it's a long song. He goes, dress yourself to kill. And it's over. Like, there's no fade out. There's no rumbling down. It's like, And that is the end of side 1 of It's Hard. And I got to tell you, I mean, and it was backed with One at a Time, which is on the second side, which you'll hear about here. The second side of this album is not great to me. It really is not. And it starts out with I've Known No War, which is okay. It's like, this is reflections of a kid growing up after World War II, had some more keys, to kind of start this off. It's a long one. It's the longest song on the record. It's more than 5.5 minutes. And it feels like it, dude. I mean, it should have been 1.5 to 2.5 minutes shorter, to be honest with you. It is a little bit of a, I understand we've now flipped the record over, but it's definitely a big change. It's a lot slower. Daltrey is singing his, he's got more of the signature vocals, coming in on this one. I had a thing too about how kind of at the end it's got that joined together vibe to it with that a little bit of a callback maybe. This is about growing up in the after World War II, and it's kind of okay. Can we move on? Well, I don't know. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with singing about that. Obviously, it affected a whole generation or two of people.
Mhm.
And it's very different growing up in England post World War II than in the US
That is true
post
too.
World War II.
And I think we forget that too, you know, but post World War II in the United States was the greatest time ever. I mean, we just,
Ever.
yeah. And, you know, you talk about, I think it was Joe Elliott talking about growing up in Sheffield and there was no metal anywhere because all the metal had been taken, all the gates, all the railings, everything had been taken away to make bomb parts or machine guns or whatever. And we're sitting there thinking, yeah, we're on top of the world now.
Yeah, no, and it's very much a black and white society. There's still rationing going on after the war. Kids growing up and playing, football around destroyed buildings. That was just the way it was, and Pete had been sent off to stay with, relatives or whatever, while
in the country.
Yeah. And bad things happened to him as they did to a lot of kids during that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
But, when it does this slowdown, it does some tinkling with the piano keys and there's some organ and then there's some strings and it comes back for like the emphatic reprise basically at the end. I'm like, it's still too much. Now, what's interesting is Rolling Stone, who's so often out of touch and missing the point. And they rail on great bands who do great things. Like they totally rail on Led Zeppelin and a lot of bands we like Iron Maiden and stuff like that. They're giving this 5 out of 5. And the reviewer, Park Pewterbaugh, if that's his real name, was like, this is an amazing song. This is the best song they've done since Who's Next. And I think this is going to be their next anthem. I'm like, you are an idiot. You must have just been like, Jan, I love the Who. Can I please review this album? He's like, yeah, sure. Go ahead. He's like, this is the greatest Who album in so long. And I'm like, no, it's really not, dude. I don't know what he was smoking on this or, what he had up is whatever, but this is not great Who. That's just me.
And it's an interesting change of pace too, from the, talking about the coked out Miami
right
celebrity parties to, okay, well now we're gonna get real, folks. We're gonna talk about the war effort. Like,
give you a little taste of Roger Daltrey, Roger Waters' life.
Yeah.
Take it back here. You feeling good? Okay, let's stop that right
now. Yeah. Well, we're about to put the kibosh on that.
Yeah, it's enough of that. But then they go to One Life's Enough, from the longest song on the record to the shortest song on the record, which is not even 2.5 minutes long, which is at least what they could have cut out of I've Known War to make it a better song, So there's synth intro, some piano. It has some nice arrangements to it. And I'm wondering, is he talking about mortality on this one? I'm not 100% sure.
And you get that, you get the soft, high Daltrey voice coming in, not the yelling at you. Yeah, it's a song about, wait, what are we talking about? Are we talking about finding love, making love, dying? Yeah, what's going on here?
Yeah, and so is he saying, hey, I don't need a second life, as a solo artist, I've been one as a rock star is enough, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure, but there's definitely a lot of looking back. I think maybe not lamenting or regretting, just kind of looking back at you've gotten to this point in your life in your mid to late 30s that there's no such thing as a rock star in their mid to late 30s, yet somehow you still are. So should I still be going forward and making videos and making new records, or should I be stepping back because I'm not that kid anymore?
Yeah. Have you already lived the life that you were supposed to?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, at 36 or 37, your life's pretty far from over.
Right.
Most people are just hitting their stride at that point, professionally, personally, all that kind of stuff.
And I know that's what McCartney said too. Like, there were people that were like, "Oh, you should just go away." He's like, "Yeah, I'm like 30. I'm not going to go. I still have stuff to do. I'm not going to go retire. What's wrong with you?" And I mean, even though they were a little older than the Duran Durans of the time, Daltrey was still a really good looking dude. I mean, he gets out of that limo with his frosted hair and the jean ensemble that he was wearing.
Right.
He's a pretty cool looking dude.
Yeah, and he's in great shape. I mean, sings without his shirt off throughout that tour. He never has sleeves on. He's still in great shape in his 70s. So, and he had been doing a lot of acting. That was kind of his next thing, maybe, is to be more of an actor, to do soundtrack stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're all kind of looking at, this is the end of the Who. This is the end of an era. And who am I?
Right. Not who are you?
No, they don't care who I am. They care who they were. Anyway, all right. Song number 3 on the second side, song number 9 overall, One at a Time. This is the third Entwhistle tune, and it's got all sorts of John horns at the start of this thing, right?
This is I like this song a lot. The more that I listen to it, because it's John Entwistle, I think, just saying, okay, I'm just going to do my own thing right now. He plays the horns, he plays the bass. You listen to what's being said there. If you want her, you can keep her. I can only handle one at a time.
Right. One at a time.
Correct.
And this is about girls in general. Is this about specific girls? Who cares?
Right.
It's fast paced. It fits in with the Who, and it's got a bit of that old bash, right, with lead everything going on.
Correct. And so you've already had, you've talked about war. Now you've talked about, reflecting on your life, and now it's like, yeah, you know what? It's about, like you said, it's about chasing girls. It's about being in love with it. This is more of the bombastic Who. I'm not going to tell you what we do, but you know what happens.
You know what we're up to. Yeah. I can chase her, but if you really want to, go for it. I got another one waiting right over here.
Yeah, there's
a line.
The inventory is quite large these days. Yeah, even at this point in time, I can only imagine what that tour was like. Only imagine.
But it's under 3 minutes. This is a very short song, but they squeeze a lot of good stuff in here. I too like this one. I come into it thinking, all right, I'm going to love the Pete ones, and the Entwistle ones are going to be a bit of a ride. No, this one's actually pretty good. And considering they use it as a B-side, and maybe more than once as a B-side, I'm sure they didn't play it, but pretty good song, I think. Whereas, why did I fall for that? Okay, well, there's some classic. This is song number 10, number 4 on the side. Starts with a classic riff and Roger doing some singing. Pete's in the background doing some vocals, a little spare guitar. Is this a political song? Is this, lamenting the fall of the UK and, the rise of Thatcherism, and realize that the UK is not what it once was?
It could be, because they keep going back to that. Why did I fall for that? Did you vote for the wrong person? It sounds to me like it's kind of like a 50s throwback song with the picking at the beginning.
Oh, sure.
To me, this is the track the drums sound the most like Keith Moon, because he's back there bashing away on it. And then the multi-part harmony, I think, sounded pretty good. I think it might all be Pete, but it sounds like there's more. They sound like they tracked him a couple of times, so it sounds like more than one person. I like the way that sounded.
There's still some good production value on this, but it'll. 4 minutes to midnight on a sunny day. Maybe if we smile, the clock will fade away. We've never been taught to fight or face up to facts. We simply believe we'd remain intact. But nobody knows why we fell so flat, and rash promises sincerely made by people believe that we are being saved.
Yeah, that definitely sounds
political.
Like correct. Correct.
They made us all believe that we were acting white, but the truth is we've forgotten how we used to fight, and this is. And the empire's crumbling, It used to control all these territories. They're all independent now. They may be under the Commonwealth, but you have the Queen's face on the money in Canada, but you don't rule Canada, or India or South Africa or really any of these places anymore. And now they don't even rule their own island, really. I mean, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, which isn't their own island, that's someone else's island, but they have their own devolved governments, so. Yeah, you ruled the whole world in 1700. Now, what do you rule? You've got people, squatting in flats. You've got huge unemployment. The UK and the US were kind of facing a lot of the same problems at the end of the 70s and beginning of the 80s, and the same now, to be honest with you.
Unfortunately, yeah. And do they package it? Is this a longing for a different time, and that's why you kind of made it sound like a song from the 50s, or it put 50s kind of tones in it?
That's interesting. But I also wonder, with the having Boris Johnson kicked out and then all the stuff with Donald Trump, is it kind of happening again? It's like, why did I fall for that?
The same things. You're right. The same things keep happening over and over and over again. If you go back and read I'm sure if you read the newspapers from 1982 right now, you would say, hey, wait a minute. That's still going on today.
Exactly. Or it's happening again, it goes up and it bubbles under, but it's always there.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to song number 11 or 5 on the second side, which is A Man is a Man. This is obviously about Pete and his masculinity, is it not?
That's what it sounds like to me. That's a weird situation for him to be in. You know, you're in this, you're a rock god, you are, in a giant band, and that means chicks all over the place. But maybe there's something else going on. But how can you say that? You definitely couldn't say. I mean, you could barely say that in the 80s.
Well, I mean, he did kind of say it on Rough Boys 2 years earlier, right?
Kind of, right. But even that was like, because I remember that, not that at that specific time, but like around, like the mid 80s, where it was like, is he gay? Is he, because he can't possibly be gay because he's this giant rock star.
Pete Townshend from The Who,
correct, yeah.
And he's married, so he's not all the way gay.
Right. So what's going on here? And to live that, what is it? What does it mean to be a man? And it's interesting when they, again, something people are still struggling with today.
No, you're right. And look, I mean, it's way ahead of its time as far as I'm concerned. It's way ahead of its time. It was probably a head scratcher for listeners back in 1982. It really was, even though they might have been seeing Boy George of Culture Club on MTV after they heard this. It still was, what does it mean to be a man and to be vulnerable and stuff like that? Stuff that gets a lot of talk now. And obviously sexuality and bisexuality and all things across the spectrum are talked about all the time. They're very hot topics. They're very hot political topics. And people are now allowed to be out and to be more of who they genuinely are. But back then, not so much. And so this is a pretty bold statement, I feel like, on the part of Pete Townshend.
Yeah, even then it was, if you were a man, you were probably the main breadwinner in the house. Like, you went out, you worked all day, you came home, the dinner was cooked for you. You really didn't talk about much. How's your day? Fine. I'm going to read the paper and go to bed. Yeah.
Someone breaks in, I'll shoot him or I'll
correct.
Wrestle him down, whatever, that's what I'm here for. Our roles are very clearly defined,
Correct. And maybe you have other thoughts there. Maybe you think to yourself, you know what, maybe I just want a day to myself.
Yeah. Right. And it's just so weird to think the hyper masculine and sexually charged 80s that came after this, like the hair metal pants and all the, that kind of stuff, it's hypersexualized stuff. And, for some of the women too, it's, I don't know. I give him a lot of credit for releasing this song, for writing this song and releasing it at this time. Obviously this isn't going to be for everyone. You're going to get backlash on something like this. And to go back and find this one is something ahead of its time for a more modern time like we're in now. I think fits in really well.
Right. I wonder too, when this was brought up, whoa, what is this? Oh, we're just going to sing it. I don't know about this, but you put it on the backside. Well, we'll put it as the, second to last track. Nobody over here anyway.
No one, we'll make it a B-side, No
one will make it that far.
No one's going to hear this. Don't worry about it. They'll all be listening to Eminence Front and then
correct. And
listen to Who Are You,
Yeah. They'll go back to the beginning of the first side.
Yeah, don't worry about that shit, man. You talk about crazy affairs, talk about your life as though it mattered because you get attention because you block the stairs, stuff like this. But affairs is something he's talking about. And, if he's married to a woman, well, yeah, he's having affairs with girls and maybe some boys too. When a man is a man, doesn't act a plan, you have to perform like John Wayne in some B feature flick. He's a man we can offer his hand and not afraid of appearing insane if he can't break a brick. So you don't have to be Mr. Tough Guy all the time. You don't have to play that role and still be a man. But there's a lot of lyrics in this. I mean, look, it's a pretty good song. So, I mean, to me, this is the one that, you find one on the album that either you don't remember or you didn't know, or now it hits you with different meaning. I'm like, this is actually pretty good. And it's, it's always going to be later in the album because of its content, but it's actually a fairly good song. Maybe more of a Pete solo song than a Who song, though.
Okay, but you say that, but I've got a note here about how I liked how they were two-parting the harmonies. That sounded pretty good, and you're not doing that on your solo record.
That's true. That's a good point. So maybe I was wrong about that. I had an idea, but maybe it was a bad one. I don't know.
And you're a jerk. And there we go.
That's it. Wrap it up with Cry If You Want. Again, not not a great one. And it starts with a marching beat from the drum and the bass, right? So you got Kenney and Ox there starting off there. It's a little bit of a highlight for Entwistle on there. It's a bit of a rocker and crashed start, but they only played this. No, they played this every night of the tour except for once. So I wonder if this is the one they subbed
maybe
for Cooks County when they played Chicago that one night. Might have been.
Probably. Yeah, this is one of those ones where like you could tell, like if I just played this track for you, where do you think this comes in the end? This is the last song. This is the last song on the record. You can just tell we're kind of just crawling across the finish line now.
I mean, it's not horrible, but again, it seems like he's reflecting on his life, looking for another chapter, but still stuck in this first life as a rock god. And it's like, how do I make this transition? Do I have to transition? Why do I have to transition? Kind of thing. And then it fades out with some odd guitar noodling from Pete, but it's, it fades out with kind of more of a whimper than I would like.
Right. And then that's the end of the record. Yeah. I think it doesn't come until like the 4:05 mark where he's actually soloing and you're like, oh, okay, well maybe we could have had that a little earlier.
Right. And so, and then that's it. That's the last Who record basically ever. Yes, Endless Wire came out 25 years later, obviously without John Entwistle. And it was a double album, so it had a lot of extra stuff on it. Again, their 2019, I think it was 2019, Who album, I thought was great, but it was a long time coming, and Pete had lived and learned a lot by then. It's interesting that Daltrey actually liked Cry If You Want, so they played it on that 82 tour. When they did the 2006 Endless Wire things, like, we got to bring that back. That's a good song. We got to play that. And it didn't last long. Like it lasted for a little while. Like, no, we got other songs. We've got other deep cuts. We've got other stuff we can do.
So how do you gauge that? Is it just crowd reaction? Like, no one's digging this? Maybe.
And it's also, I mean, is it great to play? Are you digging it? Is this like, oh yeah, I'm so glad. Is this bringing back memories of 82, or is it bringing back like, God, it wasn't even that great then, and we had odds. I don't know.
Yeah.
But talking about that, I mean, where in the Who's catalog do you put this one? Because I think most people would put this at the very bottom or near it. And there's some other Who albums that I like a lot more, obviously. But I don't know. Here on re-examining it, it's probably just south of the middle. I mean, they really only made 12 or so albums. Maybe you call it 13. And this was 11.
I think this album does not get enough credit. And I think this was probably dismissed a lot because of the Keith Moon thing. And you can tell. I mean, again, if you didn't know anything about this and you listened to it, you would say that something is off on this.
Right.
Nothing against Kenney Jones, but it's just not a typical Who record. So I think a lot of people dismissed it. But if you listen to it, it's a lot deeper than you think too.
Yeah.
And I think the other problem was that, or the other issue was the big song was Eminence Front, right?
Right.
So that's about, it's about being a rock star. Okay, we get it. We understand.
And no Roger Daltrey on the vocals. I mean, I like Pete singing the song. I do. But the Who are Roger Daltrey belting out the songs.
Correct. But you're missing some of these other ones that kind of get into more heavy duty life things, life subjects. So I think it's a better record than it gets credit for. I don't think it's the best one they ever put out. I'll never say that, but I wouldn't put it at the bottom either.
No, I'd probably reserve that for Endless Wire, to be honest with you. But I don't think I'd be alone in that necessarily. Who by Numbers wasn't great. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to give you a ranking of 1 to 13 or whatever.
Yeah.
My guess is it's probably somewhere in the 7, 8, 9 range for me, better than some, probably closer to like 9. I love the Eminence Front, but some of the keyboard stuff, it's very dated to me.
Right.
It really is. But the thing is, some of the lyrics and some of what they're reflecting on, maybe just because in 1982, when we were 9, we wouldn't have gotten any of this stuff anyway. We didn't really know what an Eminence Front was. We're just singing along. Eminence Front. It's put on. Yeah. Nice little riff there. Now I can understand this stuff. And some of the stuff he's singing about makes more sense. And when you're reflecting on who am I? What am I supposed to be? I don't know. I can relate to that. I went to business school. I made people a lot of money in my 20s and 30s and 40s. And then suddenly I'm raising my kid and I'm running a podcast. Aren't I still supposed to be in the office? Aren't I still supposed to be wearing a suit every day?
Right.
It's okay to reinvent yourself. It's okay to kind of say, hey, this is not what I planned when I was a teenager, but is it okay? And that's kind of stuff we all have to figure out.
And definitely a lot more going on here than I realized. Definitely. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've listened to this record before this.
Right.
I don't know. I may have never made it all the way to the end. I don't know. But there's a lot more going on here than it gets credit for. It's more complex. Yeah, more complex than it would look at from just listening to the singles. If you just listen to the two big singles, you're missing a lot on this one.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what we were raised on, was those big singles. So like, okay, that's the end of the Who. Well, listen to the rest of it. There had a lot going on, and look at the background of what was going on with the band, with Pete as a solo artist, with music at the time. And I think if you give it a listen through those lenses, then it'll mean a little bit more to you.
Yeah. And the other thing too is it was an interesting time to be a rock star also, because, in the 60s, it was all about, oh, you got to fight the man. And, this is my generation and what's going on here. And now it's like, man, I got a lot of money and I got a lot of fame and I get to do some pretty cool stuff. And is that okay? Is it okay to be a rock star? Is it okay to enjoy the fame and money that I've accumulated now? I don't know. I mean, I feel real good. I have a good time, but I kind of feel bad looking at the world around me. So interesting time to be those guys.
Very interesting. Okay, well, that wraps our episode on The Who's It's Hard, 1982, last album by The Who, really. I mean, some people might say Who Are You was their last album in 78 because that was Keith Moon's last album. Of course, they did, as we talked about on the show, record The Endless Wire in 2006 and the brilliant The Who album in 2019. But for all intents and purposes, this was the final Who album. They'd reached their mid to late 30s. They knew it was a young man's game. They'd kind of been relying on past works through the films of Tommy and Quadrophenia and The Kids Are All Right for a long time at that point. So Pete had a solo career starting to take off, and there was no such thing as a 40-year-old rock star. There just wasn't. So they figured, well, we have to go do something else. And that's what they did, although they would eventually get back together in 89 and then later in the 90s, and for the most part have been some kind of entity ever since. This was the farewell for The Who on the new recording side, and Eminence Front was a big hit for them and is still something they do today. It still gets a great crowd reaction and still as poignant as ever about people being false or fake or worrying about all the wrong kinds of things. And I got to admit, I hadn't listened to it in a long time, and some of the songs stand up better than I thought. Some of it sounds a little dated with the way they use the keyboards, but still, Pete Townshend and John Entwhistle are great songwriters and deserve a lot of credit. And this may not get the press that Tommy or Who's Next or Quadrophenia or The Kids Are All Right or any of the greatest hits albums gets, but I think this is a quality album, especially when you say it's made in the midst of Pete making a couple of solo albums that had some really great songs on it. So, as usual, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You have got to let us know. Please email us, uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can tweet or DM us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. Check us out on Instagram. Check us out on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and download wherever you get your podcasts, be it Apple, iTunes, Spotify. Good Pods is very good to us. These put us in the top 10 lists a couple more times this week, and we really appreciate that. And if you're thinking about it, hey, look, give us a positive review. It just helps us find more rock fans like you. And if we get wind of it, send it to us. We might just read it on the show because we really appreciate the feedback. We're trying to make the show better, trying to improve the sound quality, trying to get better guests, trying to get better quality show on here for you. And I think you'll see that in the coming weeks. Of course, we thank Pantheon Pods, making a great community for us. We thank our sponsors, rarevinyl.com, where if you use code podcast, you can save 10% off all of your purchases. Now, next week, we're going to do another album celebrating its 40th anniversary, one that was pretty important to me and Jackson, but for different reasons 40 years ago. Not going to tell you exactly who it is. You're going to have to tune in for that, but it will be a classic rock artist that we've spoken about on this show before, maybe from a different band. But at any rate, we think you'll like the album and the review we do next week. So tune in for that. And until next time, you rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.